presentation on the Alvarez family. He's no Alvarez. I'm an Estrada, but I married B. Alvarez, one of Domingo's daughters, and she's a...
Would you ask people to turn off their phones?
Okay, I was asked to ask you guys, if you turn off your phones, it'd be very nice for me. Am I coming out clear or a little fuzzy? Fuzzy. Okay? Okay, I'll try to keep it right here. Anyway, if you ask my wife, she'll tell you she's an Alvarez. I just thought I married, or I just thought I changed her name. But anyway, I'm giving the presentation because I spent a lot of time with my father-in-law. And here I am getting emotional just thinking about him. Anyway. I'm going to stand over here. I got my notes. A little more on myself. I was born in 42 up in Jerome. I was raised in Patio Town. Everybody knows where Patio Town is? Lower Clarkdale? The hood? Okay. And graduated in Mingus High School, 1960 up in Jerome. Joined the Army right away, get that over with. 64, I was out, and I met Bea, and I started dating her, and we married in 66. Okay, let's talk about the Alvarez. In 1908, my in-laws, actually not my in-laws, but my father-in-law's dad and mother got the homestead. Can't hear me? How's that? Okay, I got to put it right up against my mouth. Okay, in 1908, Julia and Rosendo picked up the homestead, and they called it Sycamore, but it's actually Sycamore Siding. When you go by, anybody here been to the train? Taking the train? Halfway through the train ride, you come across the Alvarez homestead. It used to be the homestead. Now it's back to forest land, Prescott National Forest. But anyway, that's where they picked up a 62.5-acre homestead. Now you're thinking to yourself, homesteads were 160 acres. Well, that's what they used to be, but it was a homestead for another family before that. 1904, it was a homestead for somebody else. I don't know what their name was, but they lost it. And here's a reason why you lose a homestead. If you don't work on it, if you don't improve it, and you find a job somewhere to make some money, they'll take it away from you, or they used to back then. Same thing with water. The water rights, you had to use the water, or you'd lose it. So anyway, they picked up a 62.5-acre homestead, Rosendo and Julia, and they raised 9 kids. 9 kids. Most of them, when they grew up, moved away, but Domingo stayed there, helped his mother, and started the homestead, did the work there was. And if you know anything about ranching, that's work. Rosendo Alvarez was from Spain, and he migrated up to Mexico. I don't know what year, but he migrated up from Mexico, and there he found Julia, and they got together, and they migrated up to the United States. They heard about Jerome having a lot of work. Copper mining, copper smelting. I don't know how long they stayed up there, but they heard about a homestead available, applied for it, and they got it. So they moved down there in 1908, and that's the same year my father-in-law was born. I'd like to give you the names of the children they had. Maybe some of you guys will remember the names. Okay, Alfredo, Domingo, my father-in-law, was the second born. And then on to Concha. Concha was one of the girls. Another named Lupe. Amelia, Jesus, Hilario, Thomas, and Cecilio. Those are the names of the 9 kids they had. And they lived in a one room, I guess you could call it, cabin. And when you have kids growing up, you have girls and boys, girls and men growing up. Best thing to do is keep them separated because all they do is fight. So across the river, they built a rock house for the boys to live in. And if you looked at those pictures, you saw the picture I have of the rock house. Now, they weren't the only ones that lived there in Sycamore Siding. Back then, the mines were running, and they were hauling copper, a little bit of gold, silver, and zinc to the market. The train tracks run from Clarkdale around through Perkinsville and on into the main line to deliver the payload. If you've been on that train ride, I like to tell people about the siding, why they called it the Sycamore Siding. What the heck is a siding? You guys notice if you've been on the train, there's only one set of tracks. When it gets to Sycamore, there's a siding. In other words, a parking area. There's a parking area about a quarter mile long, and it just branches right off the main line and back in. It's a good place for parking to leave coal, which they use to fire the kilns in the cement plant. And there's a lot of reasons why you want a little bit of a, if you have a disabled car or something, you can park it there out of the way until you can get to it. So in case you didn't know why I'm talking about a siding, that's what it's all about, the siding. And that's where on the, I want to say the north side of the tracks is where the Alvarez property was. Again, 62.5 acres. Let's talk about what they had to do if you have a homestead. Let me mention another thing. They did never have power. There's no electricity up there. They did run some power to some other places, but when they did run the power through there, the Alvarez family, Julia, refused it because you got to remember, back then they didn't handle a lot of money. And she just thought, well, if I miss paying, they're going to take this homestead from me. And that's all they had. So they didn't take it, and they should have, but they just didn't realize how important it was to have some power, but they never did. I lived down there. I hauled a trailer down there, and I lived in the trailer, but it had a small generator. Nothing like what 110 power can give you. Here's what they had to do. They had to plant alfalfa. By the way, if they had 62.5 acres, how much farmable land did they have? About 11 acres, because there's a hillside right next to it. About 11 acres of farmable land, alfalfa. Anybody raise alfalfa? Yeah, some of you. It don't last forever. You plant alfalfa, it only lasts so many years. My father-in-law would plant it, and he didn't have a mower. He cut it. He cut it with a scythe. Sorry. he was a heck of a man. Okay, you have an irrigation ditch to water your alfalfa. It was about 1.25 miles long. You just don't dig it and it's going to run forever. Anywhere you have a wash coming down, you have to clean it out after a rain or a flood come down. So, cattle. He had about, when I was with him, about a dozen head of cattle. Because back then, when you have so many acres, they tell you how many cattle you can run. You just can't run in 100 head in 62 acres. You'll ravish the land. You got to feed them, doctor them, help them bear their calves sometimes. While I was with him, we had 3 horses, and their work too. That's very rough country up there. And if you're going to ride them, you better wear some shoes on them. You put some shoes on them. And Pepper, my horse, I had to, I had to shoe him about every 6 weeks. And that's work. I couldn't do it now. It's a back-breaking job. Don Goddard will tell you how much work it is to shoe a horse, especially if he's rank. If he gets sleepy and wants to sleep on you, or if he wants to jerk it's work, and it's a little dangerous too if you don't know what you're doing. But anyway, let's go back to cutting alfalfa. He would cut alfalfa with a scythe. That's work. And he didn't have a mowing machine. We'd go over there. Well, after you cut it, you've got to let it dry. Come back the next day or two and turn it over, let the other side dry. It's got to be totally dry before you put it into your barn. And we didn't have a baler. We would just pick it up and put it on a flatbed trailer and take it to the barn and throw it through the windows up on top and just keep it inside the barn in bulk. I thought I was a rancher. I told my father-in-law one day, I said, why don't we just get this alfalfa when you first cut it and put it in the barn, let it dry in the barn? He said, you ever seen a barn fire? I said, no. He said, well, I have, and I don't want to see another one. It will create combustion, spontaneous combustion, and it'll start a fire. You'll lose your feed and your barn both. This is the animals they kept there. Rabbits, chickens, peacocks, turkeys, dogs, of course, goats, cattle, horses, and homing pigeons. My brother-in-law David used to keep his pigeons there when he was young. Any questions? No questions at all? There we go.
There's a very intriguing story about the Alvarez family being involved in bootlegging during Prohibition. Can you tell
Oh
me
yeah.
about that?
Oh yeah. The original homestead owner, Rosendo, I can squeal on him now. He's been gone many years. But yeah, they would make bootleg whiskey. And my father-in-law knew how to make it. Prohibition was over with, and he could make it, but you can't sell it. You can use it for your family. Oh, a half a glass will get you pretty happy. Pretty happy. Which reminds me of a little story I've got for you. When I was working for the train, up the train there was a canyon they called Raphael. Pretty good sized canyon, Raphael Canyon. I was up there horseback looking for one of the calves that my father-in-law was missing, and I come across a plantation. Wasn't very big, but it was marijuana growing. When we left, I was a little dizzy, and so was my horse. We had to try it out. No, that's just a joke. When the Alvarez family lived at the siding, Sycamore siding, there was other people that were there, because that was part of the railroad hauling copper to the market. They had a school. I wish I could tell you some names, but I don't know them. I don't know. I wasn't there yet. But they had a schoolhouse and other homes, workers on that siding. And the Alvarez lived on the track side of the river. The Verde River runs on that canyon. The train goes up there, and I want to say the train is on the south side. Well, when the Alvarez got their homestead, they built their homes, the school and the other homes, on the same side. Only it wasn't, the land was not their property. They were either on Prescott National Forest or a train. The train gets an easement. I don't know exactly how much they get. But anyway, the property was not theirs. But they lived there with their kids growing up. And the grandmother passed away in 1964, she passed away, December. The train got a hold of them and said, you're going to have to move to your property, which is across the river, would be kind of north on the other side of the river. So that's when the pictures you saw there of the cabin, the Alvarez, that was the second home. I think I put that down, second home, second cabin. There was another question. There was another question.
Did their drinking water come from a spring or from a river?
Good question. I was almost missing that. My father-in-law drank right out of the river. He had a couple of 5-gallon drums, 5-gallon buckets. He'd dip them in the river, put them up in the kitchen counter, and let it settle. You couldn't really call it distilled water, but anyway, he was born there, raised there, drink that water. He developed an immunity. If there is anything that's, unless it was real bad stuff, he might have gotten sick, but I don't think he ever did. Remember I talked about an irrigation ditch we used for the whatever we had planting, the alfalfa and the crops? Whenever you have an irrigation ditch like that, if you dig a hole, they call it a river level hole. Anybody ever hear of a river level hole? Boy, oh boy. If you dig a hole next to running water, you'll hit, and if you're close enough, you'll hit water, because there's water also flowing underneath the surface of the earth. You hit the water, keep digging. This is what we did. I was with him when he had that. It was mid-70s. We drilled water level well. We went 17 and a half feet and hit water. He was about 50 yards, maybe. Not much. Maybe about 35 yards away from the river. We hit water at 17 and a half feet. And you dig a little deeper, about maybe another 4 feet, and you fill it with rock, pebbles and rock. A couple days later, you'll have water right up to the same level as your river running. That's a river level well. He built a stand over it with a pulley, and he would drop a bucket down and let it pick up the water. We'd bring it up with a rope, and that was our drinking water. Another thing I should say, you don't just have a hole in the ground. He built a wall around it, a circular wall, concrete, and he mortared it together. about 3 feet high, 3.5 feet high. And you have to have a lid over it. You never know what's going to fall in there. You don't want to be drinking water with a dead rat down there. So that's why you have to have a little bit of a rise and a lid to keep whatever. It didn't keep the spiders out, but you just knock them out of the way and drink your water. Any questions yet?
Fermin, I first met Domingo at the planing mill in 55, September 55, worked with him there for about a year. And then the next time I saw him was at the cement plant in 59, and he and I visited the ranch a little bit there. And he was telling me one time, and I don't remember the details, but he was telling me about a ranch or a farm that was right above him there on the river. You know anything about that?
I didn't hear
They like he told me there was a one-legged German man had a little farm up there.
Okay, the question was if there was another ranch upstream. The closest big ranch upstream is Perkinsville, 10 miles away. But I know of a place, it wasn't, I don't want to call it a ranch. It was just one rock house, and I've got pictures of it, and I couldn't find them. My father-in-law and I were riding up one day, and he was good at telling me everything. I was a good son-in-law. I'd listen, and keep it in here. We rode by this rock house, and he said, "This is where that peg-legged German used to live." And this peg-legged German must have lost a limb, who knows where, but he lived there, and he never told me his name. I don't think he even knew his name, but he was also a squatter. He found a place he thought he liked. It was an opening, and it went back away from the rivers far enough where he thought maybe he won't get flooded. And he just built that place, and he lived in it. So he was a peg-legged squatter.
I've been to that little place where he lived.
Nothing wrong with being a German, though.
He never really had homesteaded that. He just lived there.
Right, squatter.
He was saying, you're right, he never homesteaded, he just lived there.
He might have raised a little bit of drinking. He might have done that too, but I don't know for sure.
How many families lived out there?
That's a good question. I don't know, but there was enough to have a small crew that worked on the train, because my father-in-law also worked for the train. He also worked for the train. If you're wondering, where in the heck did they get their ice to keep their perishables, before? Well, they never did. When I had my trailer down there, I had that small generator and a propane. I had a propane refrigerator in my trailer, and they would put their perishables in there. Before that, they had an ice box. Where did they get the ice? If you've been down here to the train, just behind the train, up the tracks towards the plant, there's an old ice plant. And a lot of people say, well, no, they just kept it there. No, they made ice. It's just up from the train. I'm waiting for some questions. Corn, tomatoes, chili plants, beans, squash, sugarcane, cucumbers, and I'm sure some others that I couldn't remember while I was writing this down. But yeah, just about it. Rutabaga, and I never even tasted that. Oh, I fell in love with it. It's a lot like a turnip. Very good. Very good. I thought I saw another arm over here.
father-in-law worked for the railroad. What did he do for the railroad?
He had a good job. He had a good job. Part of the dynamite crew. Part of the dynamite crew. And nowadays you don't even want to be caught with dynamite, not after 9/11. But we used to keep some boosters and stuff to blow up stumps. Mesquite trees leave a heck of a stump and they're hard to get out of. But dynamite takes care of them. So, yeah.
Did the Alvarez Ranch produce enough to take produce out to Jerome?
Actually, they didn't really sell up in Jerome. There was another place downriver from the Alvarez. Anyway, there was another place where they used to raise produce for Jerome. The name will come to me pretty soon. This couple lived in this place here, just downriver, I want to say maybe 2 miles. And he would raise produce, take them up by mule up to, or donkeys, up to Jerome and sell the produce for his revenue. The Jordan? No, Jordan Ranch was it, I want to say it was right here before right where the slag pile is. The Jordans had an apple orchard there, and they would sell their apples. The Packard Ranch. The Packard Ranch is the name I couldn't think of. The Packard Ranch was down about 2 miles from my father-in-law, and they had the rights to Jerome, I guess you want to say. He would take produce up there and sell it. And here's the story about them. He used to like to spend a lot of time in Jerome after he'd get his money from his produce. But his wife got even. She sold his place, the whole place they had, to a couple of cowboys and forged his name on a quitclaim deed and left for places unknown. That's the way the story says. The husband came down, walked in his front, and thought it was his front door, and the cowboys were with their feet up on the counter, and he says, "What are you guys doing here?" He said, "Well, we bought this place. It's ours now." So I don't know what he did, but that's the way the story went.
So is the Alvarez Ranch still in the family?
No, they sold it in 93. Yeah, 93 they sold it, but they let them stay there. They sold it. It's really complicated. They just didn't sell it to some private owners, or my father-in-law didn't sell it to private owner. He sold it, or he didn't sell it to the Forest Service, because the Forest Service wanted it really bad, but the Forest Service didn't have the money to give him what he wanted. But he ended up selling it to 2 men from Sedona, and they had property up in Jack's Canyon, Sedona. Have you ever heard of Jack's Canyon? Pretty place. They have a nice golf course up there, and they must have had some money. But they bought it from Domingo, but they had this in mind: we're going to buy him out and trade it to the Forest Service, which really wanted it, and we'll use whatever they give us for our. They can give us some property next to our Jack's Canyon property, and that's the way they did it. That was the deal. Did I say it plain enough? Did you understand that? Okay.
And what year did your father-in-law pass away?
1996.
At what age?
88. I can't stress enough. Good man.
When you're on the train going out, you get just past 6 Canyon, and it looks like the remains
Now, you're talking about, you're looking at the river and there's a boulder and it looks like there used to be a...
It's about this long, and it's about this wide, and it looks like it's a footbridge, and it heads out like it crossed the river, it used to cross the river north of the range.
You are talking about the ranch. You know where it's at. Okay. They did have that's another good thing. I'm glad she brought that up. When my wife would stay with her grandmother, remember I said their property was on the other side of the river? To go over on the other side to work or pick whatever, they had a footbridge, and they also had a suspended bridge, because the river would go up sometimes, and you'd lose all your boards that you had on your footbridge, but you'd have to get some more and fix it. But yeah, they had two ways to go to the other side. Planks down by the river, and a suspended bridge. I thought they were both gone. I haven't seen them. Questions. What did I forget?
So she asked about the produce that was going up to Jerome, and he said no. I'm assuming that it went up north, up the Alvarez Trailhead to Williams.
Taking the produce up to Williams, did they take the produce up to Williams?
That's a long way. Not that I know of. I've been up there. You know, from his place, you can take Railroad Draw and go to Henderson Flat, and then catch the road, the Perkinsville Road from Jerome. It'll go on up to Williams, 4th Street. But I never heard about produce going up there. Jerome was a lot closer for him to sell. My father-in-law, that's why I forgot to tell you, he also sold some of his produce, whatever was that he wanted to sell. Mount Hope. He would sell it to Mount Hope. When Mount Hope was back in the other place, going into Cottonwood, he would sell that produce to them. Eggs. Ask my wife, she'll tell you how to clean eggs. You have to size them, small, medium, large, extra large. Excuse me. Small, medium, large, extra large. Yeah, she would help clean the eggs to sell. If I got a question, if I have a question, we can stay here a little longer.
Yeah, I know your wife is here. How many other children of the Alvarezes are still in the Verde Valley?
How many children are still in the Verde Valley? Besides your wife?
The original children, the original.
Okay, there's she's got three sisters in Arizona, two in Cottonwood and one in Oracle Junction. So there's 3 girls and 1 boy that lives in Vista, California. David.
Is there another sister here besides Phoebe?
Is there another sister here?
In the audience?
We had a Lucy and she passed away. I didn't catch any.
The family should stand up, Fermin. I think the Alvarez family should stand up that are here today. Yes.
There she is. Thank you. Okay, I think that's about all I can cover right now. It's just, I'm going to tell you a little story that's really cute. One of the children of Domingo and Lenore was Down syndrome. We called him Chuy. Jesus. Jesus. Lovable guy. When I first started dating, B, I didn't know much about that, and I was just leery. But I found out he was very, very lovable. Chewy loved his coffee. He loved that coffee. In the evening, when they're all talking and ready to retire, they would leave the coffee. And you know, back then, you would just put grinds in water and let them boil. It gets pretty strong if you use too much coffee. Well, in the morning when he would wake up, he had to have his coffee. So he'd get a cup, and he didn't want to stoke up the fire because you got to get that fire going, and it takes a while. He wanted his coffee. He'd get his cup, put it down, and he would get the coffee that was left over in the pot and pour it cold, grinds and all, and drink it. He loved his coffee, didn't he? But he was real lovable, Down syndrome. He was very hard to understand. He never went to school. And all he heard was Spanish. And even if you knew Spanish, if you could talk it and he would talk to you, if you didn't know him and spend time with him, you'd still have a heck of a time trying to understand him. My name is Fermin. Chewy would call me Kohume. I thought, oh, that sounds like I'm Hawaiian or something. Kohume. My wife is B, and he would call her Tril. Sophie back there that's trying to hide from me. Sophie was called by Chewy as Hia. That's the best he could do for Sophia. But anyway, quite a fella. I'm waiting for somebody to ask a question.
Fermin, on the narration on the train, as an Albertan, I hear this all the time. Did the Alvarez's that says they paid 25 cents to hop on the train and ride it into Clarkdale? Is that the round trip there, or is that each way?
When they took the shut off from when they lived on the train, it cost 25 cents.
Yes. This is what my wife told me, about 25 cents, because they say, how does she get to school sometimes? Most of the time they were spending with their grandmother during the summer, and there was no school. And when there was school, they had another home in Jerome. But yeah, that's what I heard. It was 25 cents a ride to go up to Clarkdale here, or here. Good question. One way is 10 miles from their place to the depot, 10 miles. Another 10 miles to Perkinsville. So the train ride is 20 miles and the round trip is 40. In case you guys are wondering about the train and you want to ride it, first of all, you're going to fall over for what they want. And if you really want to go, you better go now. It just keeps going up, 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 up. When I first started working the caboose, 6 people, I would take 6 people up, $600. And now it's up to 8. I've been gone 2 years now. This past June, I retired.
You're a legend on the train, people still talk about you.
You're still a hero. You're still recognized on the train today.
Because I love that ride and I love talking about my family. Thank you.
I was just going to say, you said he lived in Patio Town. What year was that?
Patio Town? It's right below the train.
What year did you live in Patio Town?
What year did you live there?
52 to, we lived in California for a while, and then we came over here to
You lived there in the 50s.
52 till about 58. 52 to 58, and then we were still in Clarkdale. We moved uptown. Right by the old post office on that other side, where that Copper Museum is. The closest house there on the corner, right by the fire truck. Right in front of the fire truck is where I finished high school. Very true, yeah. In the wintertime, you can see the cabin, the Alvarez cabin, and I believe the tack room and the rock house in mid-winter. But in the summertime, you can't hardly see anything. It's just really, the foliage covers all the buildings. Did you ever read your history on the Homestead Act? The Homestead Act. It was to lure people out west. And most of your homesteads, the regular homesteads, were about 160 acres. And then the way they learned about it, just about all the population was in Jerome. And that's when Rosendo heard about it, and he applied for it, and he got it. You know, talking to a lot of people on the train, on the caboose, they ask me, who in their right mind is going to want to work down there? But they fail to realize back at that time, if somebody offered you 160 acres with running water and raise anything you want and raise your kids, and let's say you're from Mexico, you didn't know the English language, you would grab it. You'd grab that offer. They were fortunate to do that. Otherwise, he would have been a miner. Mining wasn't the best. Still isn't. Yes. Yeah, here's the way they did it. They hired one teacher, and she taught all ages. That's what they told me. Perkinsville also had a schoolhouse. Yeah, they would. I don't think they could afford to have different teachers. It was just one teacher taught all ages. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, the smaller kids, and then high school, they had the. It's not that they had a lot of people down there. They had a few. They worked it out. My wife never went to that school. She would ride the train to go to school when they weren't on vacation, and they'd say there was a day where they had to go to school, then they'd ride the train. But most of the time they were up in Jerome already, and they'd go to school up there.
Did you graduate from Clarkdale High School?
Me? I went to school here in Clarkdale High School, but we graduated in Jerome that year. It was 1960. That's when the population was getting so high, and Jerome had a high school that was abandoned, but it was bigger and it had more room, and I guess they got funds where they could fix it up and start going to school in Jerome in 1960. In 72, they built where it is now in Cottonwood. Yeah, when I was growing up here, and I know Vincent can remember, and Vernon. Anybody hear of six-man football? I'm old. Six-man football. It was fast. You had to cover that area with six guys. Six-man football is what we had. I don't think we had wrestling. The reason why, here's a good something that brought it up for me. Remember I said we moved here in 52, Patio Town. They say that the mines and smelter closed down in 52, 53. I want to say it was more like 52, maybe even 51. They knew they were going to close down. And so funds for schools and stuff went way down. Even though they had good teachers. You would think, they'd just get somebody that could halfway be a teacher, but we had some good teachers. Miss Rail, she taught English and DeWalt. We had a teacher, two key teachers here, and superintendent. Had good teachers when they were in school when I was in school, but they were smart, and when become teachers, I just thought I'd go over there and work for the cement plant. Dusty work. How's your lungs? Don? He's falling asleep on me.
His lungs are as good as anybody's, trust me.
As good as anybody's? I think mine's pretty good for considering you got cement plant up there, and anybody here ever lay block? Anybody here ever lay cinder block, slump block? You use mortar? When they make mortar, they have a mortar run up in the mill, and they add, not anymore, but they used to add asbestos when they were grinding, and they would mix the asbestos with the cement, and it makes a good cement for laying block. But asbestos is not good for us. They did give us respirators, but I don't know if they were good enough to really stop everything. Sometimes I think about it, what if I do get that? You never know. My dad and mother, they weren't born in Mexico. They were born right up here. My dad was born in Jerome. My mother was born down in Patio Town, Clarkdale. Let's see, how do I start this? They somehow met each other. They would have dances at different places, and they met each other, and they got married. And my dad was working for the mines. But like I said, the mines aren't the best place to work. And this was about the year that California, Los Angeles especially, had a lot of work going over there. So that's what we did. We moved over there for about 6 years. My dad became a die caster. They make castings with different types of metal. But he got sick. He got goiter. He was in an explosion and burnt his buttocks, his leg, his back, shoulder, and his part of his face here. He darn near got killed. The guy that his pot exploded, he died. And he just didn't want to do that anymore, so that's when we moved back in 58, 59, sometime there. And he finished off working for the city of Clarkdale, my dad. And just before he retired, he worked for the plant, cement plant. And then retired there. He also passed away at 88, same as my father-in-law, 88 years old. I've got one sister and one brother. My sister's older than me, I'm the middle one, and my brother is 1 year younger. My brother lives in Cottonwood, and my sister, I believe, lives in Prescott.
Did you catch me floating down the river? How'd you catch up with her? School?
We met in school. We're only a year apart, and she went to school for Mingus just like I did. Yeah.
I don't know if she was just floating down the river and you caught her.
Same birthday. Same birthday.
Okay, that's all I got. I don't have any more questions. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Fermin. I'd like to invite all of you on Saturday, October 1st, to come over to our museum. We're going to reopen that day. It's the same day as Clarktoberfest, and we've got all new exhibits, so please stop by. Thank you.